I just have to look at it to see what I was doing.
So is it going?
It should be, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So welcome to today's presentation. The goal for this presentation is for y'all to be able to save it on your computers, and then 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when you are a school psychologist and you realize this is an issue that you heard it talk about once a long time ago in school, you can pull it up. So some of the information here is more big picture rather than just what's happening today, but it is current. When children are trafficked and what school psychologists can do. So today we're going to discuss your understanding of human trafficking, and then we'll look at the definitions, descriptions, some facts and fallacies, and then some protective factors. We'll talk about our current cultural climate here in the US, the 3 Ps of addressing human trafficking, and then wrap it up with current approaches in school psychology, and you will have the opportunity to practice some potentially very real life situations that you may encounter in school psychology. So I want you to use the crayons and a piece of paper or the building blocks and Legos there, and draw or build something that kind of depicts your current understanding of human trafficking.
So we're supposed to draw something that communicates our understanding of human trafficking.
Yes. About 2 minutes. What challenges are y'all experiencing in trying to depict your understanding of human trafficking?
What challenges you're asking us to answer that now?
Yes, what challenges are you experiencing?
I guess just like the lived experience of the people involved. I have such a very conceptual, abstract understanding of just the key actors and
Yeah.
not really the process.
Okay.
So I guess depicting, yeah, just the lived experience of the people involved, aside from a broad generalization.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, I think that with human trafficking, it can be as something as large scale as what we talk about with Jeffrey Epstein, or it can be something in your backyard where your neighbors are trafficking their family members,
Right.
and selling their children, their wives, I mean, men get trafficked too.
Yeah.
And it can be both, sexual or labor or something else. And being able to display all of those on one sheet of paper, I think would take a long time and a lot of thinking.
Yeah, so here's kind of the vibe that sometimes prevails when we discuss human trafficking. It's this huge global issue which seems kind of vague, but also incredibly important. It inspires moral outrage. Someone out there should do something. I just don't know what. How many of you relate to this? Okay? Yeah, here's a better one. It's a little longer. This is as concise as I could get it. I'm sorry. Human trafficking is a global problem which occurs locally every time. When we say that, we mean that the risks for it, the resources to address it, and the laws surrounding it vary significantly by location. And we'll get into that more. But this is very important to remember that it varies by location. I would say rather than moral outrage, it inspires moral clarity. I understand the outrage. I have experienced the outrage, but I have found that outrage does not serve victims long term. Outrage inspires us to do something, but it also inspires us to act before we understand the situation. It inspires us to overlook key components of the situation. Moral clarity is, I think, a healthier perspective where this person's dignity and safety matters. And so we're going to find a way to honor that. I can maintain knowledge of the risks, resources, and laws in my location, recognize problematic dynamics, and provide aid within my sphere of influence. So what is human trafficking? As defined by the U.S. government at its core and as experienced by children. If you haven't started keeping notes, you will see some blanks here. For question number 2. According to federal law, human trafficking could be a sex trafficking where a commercial sex act is induced through force, fraud, or coercion, or when the person induced to perform such an act is under 18 years of age, or the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services accomplished through force, fraud, or coercion with the intention of subjecting the person to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. So the underlying portion is to highlight that when we're talking about sex trafficking of minors, it does not have to be an elaborate setup. As long as there is a sex act performed by a minor for which compensation has been rendered, whether the child receives the compensation or the child's parent or somebody else, if there is a sex act by a child for which compensation has been rendered, according to federal law, we have child sex trafficking. So this gets to what you were talking about, Dylan. Human trafficking as experienced by children. My boyfriend makes me do weird things, but he buys me nice stuff. You might hear that. You might hear a 40-year-old talking about the boyfriend she had when she was 13. You got no money for drugs? It's okay. You can send me a picture instead and I'll give you drugs. This one is far more common than I wish it was. Fathers with daughters who see their daughters as an access point to more victims. According to the Polaris Project has a list of survivor stories. Dylan, if you want to go look at that. 15-year-old Jose thought he found love online. I was a teenager who spit on cops and had multiple gang initiations. I was tough, not the victim of anything. And then there's this story to follow. I think I'm not going to click on that YouTube shorts because for the sake of time, and then y'all can Google it afterwards. But Lil Tay grew up with her parents arguing over custody and over who had the right to her publicity, who had the right to decide how public of a figure she was, how the money was handled, and all of that. So she had some notoriety before she ever hit 18. She used this notoriety as a 17-year-old to tease that she was going to be the youngest OnlyFans model. So at age 17, she was recruiting. And when the clock hit 18 years old of age, she opened her OnlyFans account and she earned $1 million in the first 3 hours. So I want to know how that would be ruled if it is legal for recruitment to happen when the child is underage, if the sexual services are not provided until they are of age. So some quick facts, and we're looking globally and then here in America, honoring that balance of human trafficking as a global issue, but it happens locally. So globally, minors have a higher risk of familial trafficking than adult survivors. This means either a family member is the trafficker or the buyer. Approximately 1/3 of human trafficking victims globally are minors. School children report knowing friends who had experienced this. So even if school children are not direct victims, they can be indirect victims. And then a global issue to be aware of is child marriage. It's an easy way for traffickers to trap children, and it is indicative of cultural values. So some cultures will allow for child marriage because they see it as an escape out of poverty or an escape from abusive homes, and that can communicate something about the infrastructure of that culture or of that location. So be aware of that. Here in America, the US is considered a source, transit, and destination country for victims. So American victims are trafficked outside of the US, victims get trafficked through the US, and victims get trafficked to the US. California, Texas, and Florida are our top 3 states. Miami is our top city. And over half of US survivors do not escape trafficking without a criminal record. 90% of survivors with a criminal record say it is at least in part, if not entirely, the result of being trafficked. So when we're trying to envision human trafficking and understand what it is, one of the big pitfalls that keeps us from seeing human trafficking happening around us is this ideal victim or perpetrator fallacy. So it's easier to believe that a victim is a victim if they have this innocent persona, this innocent demeanor. If they look younger, they're female, and from an otherwise stable background, which the innocent persona and demeanor can throw you off because children who experience heavy trauma can carry more of an adult-like personality. They can develop adult-like mannerisms. Or they can feel like they don't fit in with peers their age anymore because they've lost their innocence. And like Hazel, where she had this very rough, I'm not a victim of anything persona, this can make you overlook victims if you're not careful. The last two, where we expect victims to be communicative with no pronounced behavioral issues or criminal record, these two are simply not logical. If a victim is going through human trafficking, if a victim is going through abuse, we should expect them to be irrational sometimes. We should expect them to be incoherent. We should expect them to be angry sometimes, or even pretending to be okay, but just not talking about things. I think I'll leave it at that. The ideal perpetrator fallacy is it's easy to kind of think of traffickers as these bad guys, because you've got to be a really bad guy to be able to exploit someone else for profit, right? In reality, and by reality, I mean when you're actually watching interactions happen, traffickers are really good at spotting vulnerabilities and providing resources. The resources they provide just have a hook. So if you've ever been in a situation where you were down and out and somebody saw it without you asking, and they provided money or they provided, a ride to the doctor, if you've ever felt like they saw me, they understood, and they met my need without me asking, that's the type of person that the trafficker is going to come across as. So if you only see traffickers if they are, the bad guy, you're going to overlook some. I looked up the FBI's human trafficking list of people that they want found. Their most wanted list, they have 4 people on it. 3 of them are female, old enough to be grandmothers, if you go by their picture, and the male is a pastor.
Pardon me, the male is a pastor?
Yes. Which, this isn't directly tied to school psych, but when you look at labor trafficking among adult survivors, 1/3 of US, one study found that 1/3 of US labor trafficking survivors say they were trafficked by their pastor. So religion can be used quite readily to hide and to coerce. The risk factors vary extensively by location. War zones, international borders, locations with food scarcity, neighborhoods with high substance use prevalence, and then your interpersonal dynamics that facilitate harm. So your cults, abusive or neglectful families. The fact that risk factors can vary so much require us to maintain knowledge of our current risk patterns, resources, and laws in our location. So if you are looking at your paper, number 5, risks, resources, and laws all vary by location, which means we must maintain our knowledge of these issues throughout everywhere. So it's hard to boil human trafficking down to a really neat, tidy definition when it can vary so much, but I think this is about the best I can do. At its core, human trafficking involves vulnerabilities which are met momentarily through exploitation and often amplified. So the trafficker is going to provide resources that seem initially to address the vulnerability. But if a trafficker were to genuinely provide adequate resources and then stop there, they would have done a good thing, right? They would have met somebody's needs. The trafficker has to keep the vulnerability going. And so you'll often see traffickers putting their victims in positions where the victim is committing a crime on behalf of the trafficker. And so then the trafficker has that blackmail, or the trafficker has sexual images of the victim. And, I'll show these around if you don't do X, Y, Z. So the trafficker is going to add on to the vulnerabilities while also providing a certain measure of resources that keep the victim stuck. So risk factors can vary a lot. The good news is protective factors do not. These are our 2 protective factors: strong families and strong communities. So if you're looking at human trafficking and wanting to be preventive, these are the 2 things that you need to focus on. Okay, so we have talked about some heavy stuff. We heard about human trafficking through the perspective of children. It is time for an emotions break. I will give y'all about 5 minutes.
This was my guy.
That was your guy.
Do we need 5 minutes? 3 minutes or 4 minutes?
I'm personally
Not
fine.
needed.
Yeah, but others might feel differently, and that's okay.
Good.
Good.
Yeah.
Think we're good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I like to, when I'm alone and I'm working on human trafficking stuff, if it's too much, I will turn on dance music and dance. And it's not that human trafficking is the type of thing that inspires dance. It's that I need to do something.
Compensatory dance.
Yeah, there you go. Compensatory dance. I like that. It's a way to remember that joy still exists and I am capable of experiencing it. And I don't think we serve survivors well when we forget that joy exists.
Yeah.
So, okay. If we all agree that we're ready to move on, I will move on. So we're going to look at some legal issues here in America, just to see what's good, what's not good, what we're working on, what's already been accomplished, and get an idea of where America's current attitude is regarding some issues adjacent to human trafficking, issues that could affect it. So I'm going to do a Q&A where I will be asking the questions and y'all will be answering. Is child marriage in the US a state or a federal issue? Alyssa?
State.
State issue is correct. Which state was the first to ban child marriage?
California.
Delaware
Is that
banned
right?
it. No,
Delaware.
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 Mhm.
Delaware banned it on May 9th of,
Great question. I'm gonna say 2018.
2018. Do we all agree 2018?
Yes.
Anyone disagree?
1918.
1918. Dr. Huber says 1918. Dylan says 2018. And anyone want to add their guess?
Let's say 2018.
2018. Yes, Delaware banned it on May 9th of 2018. And that was the first state
Mhm.
in the US to ban child marriage.
Wow.
2018.
2018.
Wait, actually,
Yep.
Yes. The most, okay, how many states have banned child marriage since then?
Lordy.
Oh no, he's
I'm gonna
Googling.
go with,
Can you
No,
give
no.
us choices? Can you give us like four
Uh,
choices?
no, I'm not.
I'm gonna go
that.
10.
10 states, okay.
Who?
2,
5.
5. Okay, so the
10.
most recent information I could find says 18.
Okay, that's
Okay.
good.
That
Kind of.
said, the most recent information is a few years old.
Okay.
So 18, we made a lot of progress in 7 years, but that's still over half of US states as of the last count. So how many American children were legally married between 2000 and 2015? Is this a thing where it's niche? There's only, a few cults, so maybe 5,000 kids getting married? What do y'all think?
I'm gonna say 200,000.
That's correct. So this, well, it's correct according to the states that provided their data, which of course, when a state agrees to provide its data, this is marriage license, so it's fully available. It's not like other aspects of human trafficking where it's very hidden and underground. Of the states willing to provide their data on this, it added up to be about 207,000 marriages involving a minor between the years of 2000 and 2015.
Can I have a question?
Yes,
Excuse my ignorance, but what is when we talk about child marriage, what age are we referring to?
that is getting right to where I'm going next.
Ah.
How old was the youngest at the time the marriage began?
12.
12 is correct.
Yep.
This is American children. This is since the year 2000. This question, I think, gets to the core of where our culture is at on this. Like, if it is mostly, two parents or two sets of parents see that their teenagers are in love, she's pregnant, they're both 17, but for the sake of stability, for the sake of, maybe affordability, going to college, they're gonna go to the courthouse together and make sure that these 17-year-olds get married. If that's what was going on, we would expect to see a 5-5 split, right? What do you think the split actually is? For every one boy that is married, 9 girls are married. Can a South Carolina child get married?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can a South Carolina child file for divorce or request an order of protection?
No,
So fortunately on this one, yes. Yes. However, this is not true in all of the states where child marriage is allowed. It is, as we speak, it is possible for an American child, for their parents and an adult male to agree that this child will marry that male, for them to get married, and then for that child to be unable to file for divorce and unable to go to a domestic violence shelter, because if they go to a domestic violence shelter unattended, it's an unattended minor who needs to go back to their guardian, who is the husband. So, all right, so hero alert. Let's meet Ken Bolden. Ken is now a retired county clerk. Less than 20 years ago, he was legally required to provide a marriage license to a 27-year-old man and his pregnant 14-year-old girlfriend. The would-be bride's mother was present and the bride was pregnant. So under Delaware law, he had to marry the couple. But hero alert, he did no such thing. Instead, he asked them to return a few days later. In the meantime, he reported the groom for statutory rape. This man's decision started the ongoing work of changing the laws regarding child marriage in the US. Okay, a different topic, also very important to human trafficking. Are child sex traffickers and trafficking survivors, are child sex trafficking survivors in America protected by the law or penalized? Because if a child is on the street corner,
Yeah,
it's considered prostitution.
I was gonna say penalized.
It depends on the state.
Okay.
So there are still a number of states that allow minors to be charged with prostitution. The most recent state's report card project was completed in 2019, so pre-COVID. And at that time, 19 states allowed minors to be charged with prostitution. Can South Carolina children be charged with prostitution? No, there is a charge called prostitution of a minor, but two requirements must be met. The charged must not be a minor themselves, and the charged must have the ability to understand what they did. So South Carolina has this, we made progress on this one. America's overall strategy for fighting human trafficking is referred to as the 3 Ps, and this is from the US Department of State website. So we've got prosecution, protection, and prevention. These 3 collaborate and support each other. So prosecution, when prosecution is successful, it provides a great deal of protection to everyone else who would have experienced trafficking, right? When protection works, it also creates awareness, it supports prosecution, and then prevention is typically involves information campaigns and awareness, and so that increases the number of victims who come forward, and then that results in more cases being prosecuted. The government's focus on prosecution stands in opposition to mediation. So the government is not interested in negotiating with traffickers. They want to put them behind bars. The better we are at prevention, the more quickly victims will come forward. The more quickly victims come forward, the more cases we become aware of. The more cases we become aware of, the worse the problem appears. Therefore, successful prevention may feel like repeated setbacks at first. You will need to develop an enjoyment for unseen work and a tolerance for apparent counterproductivity if you want to be successful in prevention efforts. Often people in anti-trafficking tend to align themselves more with either prevention or prosecution or protection, right? Either you're a lawyer working in human trafficking or you're a student studying prevention. Awareness of this prevention paradox can keep the protection and prosecution teams from looking at prevention going, why aren't you guys getting worse? Are y'all doing anything? Well, yeah, the reason why more people are coming forward is because we're being successful. I made up the prevention paradox term, so if you drop it in a casual conversation somewhere else, they might not know what you're talking about, so, okay. Current approaches in school psychology, we don't have a clear consensus. This topic has been discussed, I think, at one of our school psychology conferences. I saw somebody discussed it, but this has not gotten the attention it deserves. There are a few schools that use social studies or civics curriculum to teach students about human trafficking. I wholeheartedly support this approach, given that children are saying that they know children who have been trafficked. So if they're watching this happen and if they're experiencing this, I think we are well within reason to give them the information to understand it appropriately. There is one school that showed up in the literature, Mount Sinai, that used school-based healthcare. So they have like a health facility within their school, and they used this as a location to screen for trafficking. I think this was out in California. And then there's been some research on educating school counselors, but we're a destination country. So just having a few school counselors across the US who understand this, and just having a few clinics in one state that happens to have health clinics in their schools, that's not the level of care that we need to be giving this topic. When I look at the literature, there are some dissertations and theses on human trafficking by school psychologists. There are a few preliminary studies, nothing really substantive on what we can do, except for one literature review, which suggested a model. And so I'm going to present that model because I think it has merit. That is the AIS model by Hannah Walker and colleagues in the year 2024, so last year. Awareness and prevention, identification and assessment, and support. What do you see when you look at this? Does this look at all familiar?
What was the question?
What do you see when you look at this? Does this model look at all familiar?
Yeah.
Looks like MTSS.
MTSS, yes, this is the argument that Hannah Walker makes. And I think it absolutely aligns. We're already familiar with MTSS, the multi-tiered system of supports in schools, where tier one, the entire school gets the prevention. Whether it's bullying, the entire school becomes aware of the need for kindness or whatever it is that the school is trying to address, right? Then we have tier two, which is where those who are most at risk for involvement in the unwanted activity receive group-wide intervention. And then we have tier three, which is support for individuals who are already caught up in it. So tier one, these are some activities that align with tier one for her. Educate. So one thing that we have heard over and over from other school psychologists in this practicum is that one of our rules will be we will teach the teachers. We'll teach them the difference between looking at a child as, you know, the sum of their grades or the sum of their family background versus seeing them as a whole person. We'll teach the teachers lots of things. Teaching the parents, teaching the staff, talking to specialists, and then community partners. We can post multilingual resources. This is extremely important here in America, given that we are a destination country. So if we have children who have been trafficked into America and they are in our schools, the chances that they speak English well are not great. It's much more common for Spanish to be the spoken language when a victim has been trafficked up here for that purpose. So having resources only in English, we're going to be overlooking a lot of the people that we need to reach. Posting myths and facts, like I went through the fallacies versus what a victim actually might look like or what a perpetrator actually might look like. QR codes to resources, that's a quick thing to put on a poster. And then the human trafficking hotline number. We also want to provide an age-appropriate level of detail and information on class walls or in curriculum. So things that would be too sensitive to put on the wall, you know, like maybe they're appropriate for a fifth grader, but not the first grader in the same school. Keep them at age appropriate levels. When we're talking about teaching the teachers, which is part of tier 1, we're not just teaching them facts about human trafficking, and we're not just teaching them about resources. Working with human trafficking victims, working with human trafficking in that sphere can be very, very draining. And so here are some mindsets and habits I've picked up along the years that can kind of help to sustain people who are in this environment. It will be especially applicable if you end up at a school where human trafficking is happening a lot around you, or if you have a victim in your school where it's been 2 years or 3 years and you're still dealing with the legal repercussions or physical symptoms, or it's a long-term journey and you need to be sustained. First of all, we get to serve the living. The word survivor does not mean that they were harmed. It means that they did not die. And remembering that has helped me to reframe a situation where, yes, the things this person are telling me are almost unfathomable, but we are so fortunate that she's alive. And that perspective can help keep you engaged. We need to love people more than we admire the problem or attend to shocking details. We are going to breach confidentiality and overlook day-to-day needs if we fixate on the most shocking. We need to pay our rent. Rent means we rest, we eat, we nurture with nature, and we talk to somebody minding confidentiality. Rest can be 5 minutes with your head down, blocking out light and sound, and just not taking in information for a bit. It can be a 5-minute Dylan walk. It can be very, very brief. I'm not talking about elaborate vacations. I'm not talking about always having 1 day off, because if an emergency happens, yeah. And then the last one, do not downplay or exaggerate your skills or other skills to yourself. There is something you can do, and there's something you can do very well, and it is probably something you have already done very well. And so when you are navigating a situation, to be aware of what your strengths are and be aware of what the strengths are of the staff at your school, that will be very helpful. So moving on to tier 2. Identification and assessment. Hannah Walker focused a lot on identifying students with risk factors for being trafficked. My addition is identifying those who are likely to engage in trafficking. So this is the list of risk factors currently affecting children in America. If they have multiple of these, they are at an increased risk of experiencing trafficking. So low SES, LGBTQ identified, racial or ethnic minorities, if they're receiving foster care, if they are doubled up, like living with grandma and grandpa because they need to make ends meet, etc. And if they have run away before. And then those who are at risk for antisocial behaviors, I don't think someone just wakes up one day and decides that they are going to sell another human being for profit, risking prison time if they get caught. There've got to be risk factors. And one of my frustrations with prevention efforts that focus only on victims is we can find 5 vulnerable people and we can give them support, but traffickers are just going to move on to different victims, right? And so if we can get to the mindsets and behaviors that embolden traffickers, and if we can address that while they're young, I think we will have a better shot at long-term prevention. So, activity time. You are a school psychologist at a high school in Lexington 1, a district known to serve a mix of very poor and very wealthy neighborhoods. You recognize the risk for human trafficking among low SES migrant. You also know that some neighborhoods represented have a higher rate of gang-related activity. Brainstorm a tier 2 intervention to address both the groups who are at risk for being trafficked and the older teens at risk of engaging in exploitative behaviors. and then discuss what questions or challenges you encountered in this dilemma. So I want you to discuss that among yourselves.
Practical safety behaviors, a workshop or continual class would be really helpful for those who are at risk, more specific than what we would already hope to give to the children at their grade level. You know how you were saying that there are certain materials that are appropriate for others and not for some. I would say that if we're having a group that is particularly at risk, just giving them those practical skills. I would say for risk of engaging in exploitative behaviors, I think we would need to look to successful programs that have maybe looked at other forms of delinquency that are associated with exploitation, but perhaps in another facet, and go from there. But yeah, it's just my thoughts.
Good one.
That's just my thoughts.
Oh,
Anyone else want to add to that? I think both of those are very valuable.
I was just trying to think of something that could help with antisocial behaviors and risks, some sort of peer mentoring thing that could give people responsibility and empathy or caring for another person, things like that.
I was thinking along the same line of how paraprofessionals like youth mentoring programs could be helpful for both of the groups. I don't know how it's gonna look like when we implement it in a school, but I feel like youth mentoring programs whereby we have like individual interactions with the students and we meet on a frequent basis, that just give us a lot more opportunities to engage with both of the stakeholders that we are talking about.
Yeah, the ideas that y'all are mentioning for the trafficking side are actually very similar to what Truckers Against Trafficking use. It's an organization of truckers who are aware of the prevalence of trafficking among the trucking industry, and like they will speak man to man and let them know like this isn't okay, like this is not acceptable speech. They'll put resources on different like bathroom walls at truck stops, etc. And they've been very effective, at least if you measure effectiveness by the number of victims who find access to resources. And so that's a form of peer mentoring. It's a grown-up form, but absolutely, I think this is valuable. Something we're going to need to consider for both low SES groups as well as neighborhoods with higher rates of gang-related activity. You might see higher rates of truancy. So that can be both a limitation and an opportunity. So it's a limitation in that how are we going to engage in a tier 2 intervention if the children aren't at school. It's also an opportunity in that you could create resources specifically for kids who have missed X number of days. And that can be your avenue in to discuss this. It's also your avenue in to discuss it with parents. Okay, so support for student survivors, tier 3. We're talking about kids who have already been trafficked and they need their education to be completed. But they're navigating prosecution. They might have some protection issues to be resolved, particularly if the trafficker was a family member. And so the grades that they get in school might be the least of their concerns. They might not feel as though they can actually get out of this life into a normal life. And so what's the point of doing school? Or why would I go to school if I could just get back involved and make money the way that I made money before? So this can be challenging. But the mindset that you want to have and that you want to teach to the teachers here for these student survivors is you want to childify children survivors, even if they exhibit adult-like mannerisms. The attitude here is not, we want you to act childish, so start acting childish. It's more, you might not know this yet, but you are still a kid. And it's safe for a kid to just be a kid here in this place. You want to have the 16-year-old or the 17-year-old, let loose and have a fantastic night with friends. And you'll find that for kids who've experienced a high amount of trauma, that can be very rare. You'll also need to challenge any commentary that says their trauma will outpace their resilience. So a kid who's already been pulled into gang activity, trafficked into gang activity, they can carry some stigma, or people can look at them as though, like, we know how this is going to end. We've seen this before, and you've got to challenge that. Children have a way of living up or down to expectations set for them over time, and if we believe that the children in our care are already we know how their future is going to end, they're going to be much more likely to go that way. We want to hold the tension between reintegration and prevention, especially for kids who have experienced family level trafficking. So reintegration is essentially where the kid is no longer being trafficked. We're trying to reintegrate them into normal life, right? Normal life involves family members. It involves community activities. But what if normal life was where they were trafficked? What if the trafficker only got a short sentence and they're already back out? How do you navigate that tension of, we want this child to have access to as many safe, healthy family members as possible, and we want this child to be protected? Both of those have to be held. Remember the possibility of delayed symptomology. So just because a victim is rescued and doesn't show immediate signs of PTSD or only has a few health symptoms, there are certain types of violence that result in long-term brain damage and long-term emotional injury, for lack of a better word. So be willing to offer remedial services for educational needs later, even if the child did not require them at first. And then remember that this child also has a future. Surviving human trafficking is not a 2-week endeavor. It is not a 2-month endeavor. I don't think it's even a 2-year endeavor. It is a long time, because you're addressing the trafficking and you're addressing all of the vulnerabilities that were there in the first place. So you'll want to build a continuity of care plan to cover summer break or the transition to college. Where are we at for time? Okay. We're almost done. 2 siblings at your high school are navigating reintegration. The older one was trafficked. This is unfortunately not an imaginative scenario. The older one was trafficked. The trafficker insisted they bring the younger sibling too, or else. The younger sibling sometimes directs massive rage, grief, and fear towards the elder. Other times, there is affection and peace. To create a successful Tier 3 plan for each child to support their education, you must gather more information. What questions do you need to ask? From whom will you seek your answers? And what is a potential final Tier 3 plan for each child? And I will give you about 3 minutes on this.
I guess one thing I would want to know as a good behaviorist, what are are there triggers? What are the situations in which the younger sibling directs massive rage, grief, and fear towards the elder?
Yeah.
And I would want to seek the answers to that, probably from more than one person.
Okay. So who would you be talking to? maybe their parents or their legal guardians.
Ask me your question.
I'm sorry, yes. Who would you talk to? You said you would,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. You would need to ask multiple people. Who would those multiple?
Well, I want to hear, yeah, probably both kids and some reliable reporters who, would be around to observe these things.
Yeah. Parents or
Probably
some
the
teachers.
parents,
Yeah.
maybe teachers.
I was gonna say anyone who is involved with rescuing and reintegration, it's someone who's consistently there. Any of those people would be good resources to understand appropriate information about the situation.
Mhm.
And I think it's also important to listen, of course, to both of the siblings, but don't necessarily try to ask them so many questions as to re-traumatize them and make them re-experience it. But if they want to offer up information to you, which I know isn't always common, but let's say they do, listening to that, really taking it into account, because their perspective can still be the most accurate because they were the one that experienced it. I think
Yeah.
you shared a statistic with me the other day, kind of related about women who experience abuse, even if they have been, obviously traumatized by that, their perspective is still very accurate.
Yeah. Alyssa and I have been talking about something else the other day, and one of the statistics that lives in my head is they've done a research study on whose estimation of danger is the most accurate in situations involving domestic violence. And they accounted for the women's PTSD. And they found that even when a woman has PTSD, her assessment of danger is the most accurate. And so if you're going to be serving these two kids, you've got to hear from both of them.
Yeah.
You have to know if there is ongoing danger affecting this switch between massive PTSD-like emotions to affection and peace. Because if there's not consistent safety, then no amount of therapy, no amount of school resources is going to resolve the core issue. I would recommend staying abreast of any legal proceedings, because it is also possible that there is safety, but if there's an upcoming court date, for example, that could be bringing back a lot of memories. And I think that there would be potentially room for group level therapy, because you have one child who endured something horrific and then was made to, or coerced into essentially perpetrating something horrific, but they're not they were a child.
Mm-hmm.
But the younger sibling sees their older sibling as you're the one who got me into this. And so you gotta hold space for both. I wish this was not a real scenario. I wish it was not a common scenario. But if you end up being a school psychologist in a district where you see a lot of migrant movement here in the US, this is not an unrealistic scenario to prepare y'all for. I think a potential final tier 3 plan for each child should involve assessment of their safety, assessment of their awareness or assessment of their current status with the prosecution team, and then therapy for the kid who is displaying PTSD-like behaviors. Therapy for both kids really, but especially therapy to target the PTSD for the one kid. And I would prioritize some of that type of care above their academics,
Mm-hmm.
but then provide those academics as well, because they need them. And it may very well be the thing that makes them feel normal again and makes them feel like they can just be kids again. Okay, so for suspected child trafficking, Collier State's Child Protective Services, and then this is the FBI, I think it's the FBI, human trafficking hotline. And then that is my list of references. So do we have any questions? I think we have 3 minutes left in my hour. Do we have any questions that I can potentially answer? I don't know all the answers, but I'll take questions. Yes.
I know still very little about this. I hadn't really thought of labor trafficking. Is there a common, I mean, I can't picture it. I mean, I could sort of picture it outside the United States, maybe.
Yeah.
Inside the United States, is there can you draw a picture of that, like what that looks like?
That's some of the information that I deleted out of the slide to make it an hour long, so I'm glad you asked. So some of the labor trafficking situations I'm aware of here in the States involve religion, where it's you need to obey your father, and your father has asked you to do X, Y, Z. Or I meant well, my business tanked and I wasn't able to pay you for 6 months. And so then the church member who's working for that business owner is supposed to give the church guy, grace. That is a real situation. I wish it was not.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and please tell me if I'm way off base with this, but the first thing that came to mind is when the government shutdown happened, everyone who worked for the federal government could have gone to work and not gotten paid. And that would be a delay. Is that kind of what you're describing?
In that case, there were other factors
Yeah.
going on. So this particular individual was living in a shed on the property of the business owner. His communications and location were monitored basically at all times.
Okay.
So it was a lot more involved than a delay.
Yeah.
But when I called that state to report it and they investigated it as far as they could, they were not able to prosecute because the victim was an adult and the victim was unwilling to prosecute.
What?
The victim was an adult in that case and was unable to prosecute. Other forms of labor trafficking here in Lexington recently, a massage parlor was shut down for trafficking. And I think that was a mix of labor and sex trafficking. A very common form can be when a migrant family needs work really badly, but they might not have all of their paperwork in order. And so then they're more susceptible to accepting employment opportunities that are really exploitation.
Yeah.
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 In Mennonite culture, there are a number of mental health facilities that are stated to provide support to teenagers and young 20s who are struggling with emotional or relational issues. But a lot of those will also involve some element of work, and it can be very coercive and very exploitative as well. Does that answer your question as to what labor trafficking might look
I
like?
think so.
Yes.
Much broader than I thought.
So I saw an interview, this guy, he needed to get his roof done, and so he was explaining to the interviewer that he had called a lot of roofing companies, but he made sure to ask, is your entire workforce 100% fully or not American citizens, but fully that had their papers to work legally in America? And it took him 6 different tries to find someone that could confirm that for him. And he explained that it was because if you do not fully have your papers, you don't have your green card, you don't have your work visa or something like that, contract work roofing. If the minimum wage in South Carolina is $7.25 and your supervisor pays you $5 an hour, if you are going to complain about that, then the supervisor could report you to ICE.
Yes.
Which would result in deportation and consequences. And so would that be an example of labor trafficking?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're being
Excellent.
exploited.
Understand.
Their vulnerability is their lack of paperwork.
Yeah.
And they're being required to work in conditions that are unfair and exploitative.
Yeah.
in that case, what could we do to help them? Because I was thinking they were being in a very precarious position whereby if they were being exposed and they're going to get deported, but at the same time, they don't have other financial means.
Yeah,
Like they feel like that's the only option for them.
that's a huge issue, where we just need more resources, more victims, especially as awareness of human trafficking increases. But this number is not just for child sex trafficking. This is the FBI human trafficking hotline. So if you have reason to suspect that something like that is going on, you can call this number.
Mhm.
It is a dicey topic, so,
Because I've seen cases before where the person at risk of being trafficked, they beg the persons who know about it not to report it to the officials.
right.
Like, please don't do it.
Yep.
Like, they know they're being exploited, but the potential consequences of being rescued outweigh the risk, and the
Correct.
traffickers know this, and the traffickers use that to their advantage. Which is why I think prevention efforts that don't address people's propensity to exploit others are short-sighted.
And I just have one last question. Maybe this one, I would like insights from you to Dr. Hübner. Let's say if we have a client coming to us and tell us about all of this, then how do we draw the line in terms of the matter of confidentiality?
Well, we have a requirement to report. There's, exceptions to confidentiality, which generally you would tell the client before they undergo counseling with you. And those exceptions include harm to themselves or others.
So if we think that our clients are susceptible to the trafficking activity, then is that one of the legitimate cases whereby we can break confidentiality and report it to the number?
This is where I would probably call the ethics expert. I should probably have a better answer for you, but I think I have never thought this through. When the consequences are, as you say, worse for reporting than not reporting. I have to think that through, and I might even, again, you can find an opportunity to consult with another psychologist. Seems like a thorny issue to me that I have obviously not.
No, it is complicated. Like, there have been gray area cases that have involved children, to where, like, I had to think through the ethics and had it crossed the line of being a mandated report or not. But when it's adults, that's also dicey, because vulnerable adults, that is a protected population just like children. But at what point is someone just in a tough situation? At what point are they a vulnerable adult? That's a gray area. And traffickers absolutely will exploit those gray areas. One of the things that we're up against right now, and this has to do with global dynamics, but they do impact us, is since immigration and international borders are such a risky area for human trafficking, we've learned that when an administration has clear and consistent guidelines for immigration, the risks of human trafficking decrease. But when there's been a lot of controversy around immigration and a lot of scuffles at the border, the risks for human trafficking increase. So that's part of why this question of, okay, they're being trafficked in America, but to address it might send them to a situation where, maybe it's a mother who's separated from her kids now. That has to do with some of the larger politics that are at play. If that is everything, I think I'm good. Do you have any questions?
Nope. Thank you very much. Right, another couple of great presentations and